I'm André Schoeman from the Schoeman family. I'm the second eldest of the Schoeman brothers. We operate a safari company where we use the aeroplanes as a safari vehicle into the Skeleton Coast and the hinterland of the Skeleton Coast, which is really what the beauty is all about, the hinterland. The Skeleton Coast itself could be dreary and foggy and cold and miserable, but boy, the interior is lovely.
Do you want to just explain a bit about where we are, where we're sitting at the moment, the sort of immediate location, and then also where we are in Namibia?
We're sitting on the banks of the Kunini River. The Kunini River is the border between Angola and Namibia.
This is far north of Namibia.
Yeah, no, that is the furthest you can go north in Namibia. And it's a very remote and grandiose, beautiful area.
So when did you first establish here? When did you first get the camp up?
We did come here on earlier occasions, but never to the river bank itself because it was a war zone after all. And so we would camp safe enough distance away from the river, 20 odd kilometers, so that we wouldn't become a soft target. So when United Nations Peacekeeping Force arrived in Namibia in 1989.
So just before independence?
Yeah.
But you also did a lot of forays. You were in the military and you spent quite a lot of time over Angola?
So I know the area quite well, even along the river, and I knew the nice spots, and so that it was one of them that I did seek out, and my dad and I discussed, and we decided this is where we would like to be, where we have a beautiful view.
Tell us the story of how you're here now and your family. What?
The family obviously has a long history. It comes from Schleswig-Holstein in 1726, which makes it 300 years now in Africa. My granddaughter is the 14th generation down here. In Namibia, we've only been 4 generations really of the 14. And my dad started up here. He was a lawyer. And so in the early 1960s, he represented a few guys that picked up diamond mining concessions from De Beers that De Beers gave up on. And if De Beers give up on a concession, you should actually listen, because my dad and them didn't make much on the diamonds. They found some, but not really economically viable. A lot of people lost fortunes on the Skeleton Coast trying to find diamonds. Some lost more than my dad. But he diversified into amethyst mining, and then he started a fishing company and a harbour. I remember the first time I came up was when I was 4 years old at Vesties diamond mine. And it's also first time in an aeroplane with Uncle Pete aeroplane flew, and my dad obviously then also had a license, and so we always thought that's the way, flying, everybody's dad flies, and so
So what was it like at 4 years old coming up into the Skeleton Coast? I mean, it's quite a barren sort of
but
backdrop.
It's cozy, when you're in a little cabin and all sorts, and it was just a lovely big sand pit to play in for us as kids. The dunes nearby were the roaring sand dunes, and we just thought that all sand dunes do that, roar.
And so how many of you as kids?
We were 5 kids, and my dad said we all could get a pilot's license when we grow older, and we all did. But my dad, as I say, wanted to develop the area. He was a developer more than anything else, but through the endeavours he fell in love with the area so much so that he wanted to protect it. And this harbour project of his didn't fit the political scene at the time, and they didn't want to allow a harbour up north, and my dad used the leverage he had to push the government to reclaim the area as a national park. And so the Skeleton Coast Park used to be a part of the Etosha National Park that the Germans proclaimed in 1907. What one sees of Etosha National Park is only 23% of its original size.
So that spanned all the way west to the coast?
All the way to the coast. And so the Skeleton Coast was part of Etosha National Park. It got deproclamated during the Homelands policy, where South Africa then created these homelands for all the various tribes, like the Damara people got Damara land, Kaoko land, Herero land, Nama land, Bushman land. All the political issue was that the government wanted all the homelands to be dependent on Walvis Bay as the only viable harbour along the whole Namibian coast, which there are no natural harbours. And this endeavour of my dad would have been quite expensive to dredge out that salt pan behind the Cape Frieux in order to create this harbour. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise. In any case, that it didn't happen, because then he was instrumental in the creation of the Skeleton Coast Park and the protection thereof.
In what year was that?
That was about the 1972 that it was proclamated, and he first operated his safari business, because by that time, he was mining, but he enjoyed the beauty of the area so much that he started bringing people in, calling his company Skeleton Coast Stones, and pretending that they come and pick up nice
precious stones.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah.
And why is it Skeleton Coast? What's the?
The name was coined actually about 1932, when a French pilot went missing. He was trying to set the record from Cape Town to Paris, and took off Cape Town, flew to Walvis Bay, refueled, and his next stop should have been Lobito in Angola, and he never got to the other end. And then the search was on for the missing pilot, and the newspaper started reporting on the skeletons and the research, of course, on the beaches of the Skeleton Coast, which would be the whale bones and seal bones, few human bones, I suppose, as well, but mainly that. And so the name Skeleton Coast stuck because of the newspaper reporting. But it was known as the Coast of Death by the Portuguese already, because it's a lee shore with bad navigation because of the fog bank that makes navigation difficult. Lee shore meaning that the wind was driving the ships towards the land in any case, and if you're uncertain of position, within no time you will end up on the beach, which was the danger. So it was a very feared coastline for that very reason.
Which is some of the wrecks we've seen the last few days up that coast.
Wrecking there is a death sentence, because on the beach there's not much, and you have 100 kilometers of sand dunes that you can't cross, so very little is known about some of the wrecks still.
So if you come a cropper there, you've pretty much had it?
I think so. There were some cases where guys knew where they were, like a guy said, he wrote on a slate and said, I'm walking to the Kunini, to this river.
Yeah.
And he said 90 miles north of here, so he knew exactly where he was. And he said, God bless who may follow. So nobody know whether he made it or not.
No. No. And so your dad set up the first flying safaris?
Yeah, the flying was a natural thing, because of the long distances involved and so on. Getting to where we are is normally a few days' drive, from Windhoek or so. It's no easy for anybody, but flying it is 3 hours, 3.5 hours.
So that was in the 70s, did you say?
Yeah, that's when, and then he started doing Skeleton Coast safaris because of the national park. Yeah, and he used to bring all his kids up every school holiday, every birthday. It's just like I do now with my kids, or brought them all up with every school holiday or birthday especially, and so on. So the area then grow on you very, very easily. So
when you're coming up as a family, you obviously didn't have the camps then, it was pretty basic, or what was
Well, we always had the mining set up, the old cabins of the mine, and so we often would shelter in there at Cape Frieux or at Sarasas or at the Westies mine, various places where, and even Merwe Bay, and so it was places where we stayed as a family, and then the camps came to be, and so on first.
So he instigated the camps in the different areas. And that's the same area as they are now, or is it changed?
We had to change, obviously, as the politics changed, and we had lost concessions. So we went through some bad spells, if you like, but we could always utilize the aircraft as a safari vehicle to have the ingredients of the safari, the same exciting kind that we do, So by sometimes having to change it a little bit. But it was in the areas that my dad always liked and so on. So, yeah, it was very easy.
So when did you take up the mantle, or when did your brothers? Was that, you had your, let's say, Angola escapades?
Yeah, okay, I was in the military, which was nice, flying on the taxpayer's pocket. I scouted out this area by air. When I went on a mission in this direction, I often diverted, you know.
Really?
Yeah, and she said, "Ops normal, but I'll be an hour late."
Was that in a helicopter?
Yeah, helicopter mostly at the time. I did fly jets, but mostly helicopter. But so it was good fun and scouting out the terrain. And I told my dad, "Here's a nice spot." He knew about it in a sense. He used to go to the Marienfluss Valley further east, but we said, no, this Hartmann Valley with that beautiful dunes, that grandiose vistas that we have, this is really lovely. And so we scouted out that spot, and when United Nations arrived overseeing the election process for Namibia in 1989, it's when we deemed it safe enough to put up a camp here.
So that was just prior to independence, you said?
Yeah, just prior to independence. And so in this vicinity, even if you look in this direction, there's a big mountain called Sierra Cafema. Behind it is where we had a nice big ops.
Yeah.
And so this area was not totally war zone, but if you had a camp, it would have been a soft target and that people would retaliate upon whenever. So we couldn't have a camp until then. And that's how we eventually, in 1989, came to the banks of the river here, put up a camp.
And then, so where are the camps now? Maybe talk us through.
The Skeleton Coast starts theoretically there near Cape Cross. And so our first camp, Quidas, is on the border of the Skeleton Coast Park, just north of Cape Cross, roughly on the map. Most beautiful geology. That area is just so spectacular from the air and from the ground. And then halfway here, Puros area, but to the west again, where the elephant are. That's beautiful for the wildlife and elephant and rhino and so on. And then the third camp is up here at the Kunini, the border with Angola. A very, very beautiful area in itself and so on. So the camps complement each other.
And they're all slightly different, aren't they, in terms of vegetation, terrain, everything?
They complement, as I say, great together. And working up to the Kunini is like working up to a crescendo. It builds on top of each other. And safari is a journey after all, so it is that coming through.
So maybe we're just talking about the Kunini. Because you mentioned a few times, what's happened in this area? Because there used to be wildlife here, there isn't really wildlife. What's your thoughts on that, how it's changed this specific area over?
Well, not just here, but everywhere else. Yeah. Habitat loss for wildlife is severe. The population increase worldwide has been an issue. And Namibia may have a very small population theoretically, but it is still very noticeable, even more so here. As a child growing up, this area, Puros and everywhere, there were no people. There were elephant here, rhino, lion, everything here. Puros area, we have the conservation effort under control to some degree with the people and the communities that we work with. The concessions or the especially leaseholds would be in the hands of the previously disadvantaged peoples, and that would be these communities. And at Puros we have a great success story in some degree. And here at the Kunini, we are still in the process. We need to sensitize the people that this area that we are in should be preserved for wildlife.
Because you said there's been quite an influx of
people,
and that's Himba.
That's Himba, but it's also some of the changed people, because they go to school. We encourage them, and some of them come back, and then with a severe drought, they went into planting crops on the banks of the river, which is another conflict situation with wildlife. And so it would be great if one can turn that around. And unfortunately, the only way is tourism, with other words, that they would value the wildlife, value coexisting with even the naughty animals. Yeah, value it in a sense that don't just go and poison a lion if it becomes a problem. You can get a permit from the government to shoot it and find a rich American dentist to do it for you.
So how do you change it around though? Is that reintroduction? Is that education of the people that hear?
It's the education thing and the employment that the people get and the sensitizing. I have meetings coming up with the communities, in fact, in June, which is next month, on the score, and saying that I'm going to upgrade the camp now to make it really nice, and but we need some cooperation on the score because people will appreciate it being more natural and so on. So that's part of the talks that I'm in.
So you work closely with the local communities and the government, and a bit of a mix of everything, a bit of a blend?
Yeah, you have to.
And they're receptive to tourists coming in. I mean, we obviously just spent the morning up with the Himba that you introduced us to, and whilst that's sort of, everyone involved in that knows the premise of what's going on in terms of, we want to come and understand how they live, and then, and they get, I think you said maize and sugar and stuff like that in return. That's a constructive way of doing it, but it's always going to change, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's all fluid, and just to keep at it and so on, the next generation to have the same agreements, because that's part of the frustration to me, is that the ability to make decisions is not as strong. If the area had been, say, private property, for instance, a decision is very easy to make. So I almost hope for a miracle in the form that the Himba get ownership of property or something like that, where somebody then can make a decent decision about conservation, because that's where it is really easier. We've been to Wolverdans, if you remember correctly, and that is on private property, and the Stefan makes such a fantastic effort there, and because he is in control and he can make decisions.
Yeah.
And that.
Whereas you're here at the moment, you're at the mercy of.
To talk and sit under a tree for 3 days with a headman and chat things out, and then there's the non-governmental organizations that you need to involve, and of course the government, especially because they are in the end the owners, if you like, of the ground and of the land, and so leaseholds and concessions then have to go through them, but then how to bring the whole lot together is the
crux of it. Yeah. Just going back to the family, when did you guys start flying? When did you sort of take up the mantle from your dad and stuff? And was it just yourself? Was it all of your brothers and? Well,
we all thought that we will be joining my dad in a sense, because he encouraged us to fly while we're still at school.
So what age did you start flying then?
When I was 16.
Right, geez. Okay.
And I got my license when I was 17, and then I joined the army.
Yeah,
and so, we all had to do national service, and then I flew on the taxpayer's pocket, which was even better. Nice, fun.
Yeah.
And especially if you're young.
Yeah.
And so we all flew, my brothers and I. My brother Bertus was the first to join my dad, and I after the military. We both went to military. I just went longer because I had to sign on a longer. They spend more money on my training, so I had to spend longer time in.
Yeah.
And then joined my dad
on the safari side of things.
Yeah, on the safaris.
What sort of year? When was that?
That was about middle 80s or early middle 80s. Okay, yeah. And then in the early 90s, my dad passed away.
Yeah.
And then my brothers then both joined up, and my sister, but my sister only in marketing and so on. So the names are,
come on, give us the names.
Bertus is my brother. Yeah. I'm André, the second oldest, and then it's Leon, my brother below me, and then Marie, my sister, and then my younger brother Henk.
Okay. And everyone was flying?
Everybody was flying except Marie, my sister, was not flying. So yes, and then from there on we just picked up, and Bertus is his wife. My wife flew, Janita, and Helga, my brother's wife, she flew as well. So we all were flying, and it made just sense, a lot of sense, and the area lends itself to it so beautifully.
But you were sort of pioneers in this area from your father, but then also from the tourism side of it as well, the travel side of it. You were pioneering camps and flying safaris as well, really, weren't you?
Especially during the so-called war years, you know.
Yeah.
Namibia was mainly known to the German public, and because Namibia was an old German colony in its past, so the German peoples with their family ties knew what was going on in Namibia in spite of the war. They knew the war was just the border with Angola, really, nowhere else. And so the tourism at that time focused on the German market. It changed a lot after independence.
Yeah, you've mentioned a few of the different German stories as we've gone along, with people hiding out in ravines and
the desert. I have some interesting stuff here. So like even shortly after one of my first safaris, somebody wanted to come to this Kunini River, and especially the mouth. He was interested in it, and it was a German gentleman. Couldn't speak much English. His wife eventually, my German is so-so, but eventually I got behind it. He was on a U-boat, and I think he was the captain.
Yeah.
On a U-boat when the war came to an end, and he was at the mouth of this river, when the war came to an end, and they didn't know what to do.
In the U-boat?
In the U-boat, because they get water and fresh supplies and everything at the river mouth, and there's nobody here. So he was patrolling the Skeleton Coast at the end of the war, and they didn't know what to do because they were waiting for new messages to come through. And when their diesel eventually started running low, they eventually had to sail up to a Spanish fishing vessel to surrender to that.
Really?
Because they couldn't sail into any harbour, they would just be sunk.
Yeah.
So you wanted to come to this location where he was when the war came to an end. Some crazy stories.
That's amazing. And then final question, what's the future of Skeleton Coast safaris now? What do you envisage, and what's the sort of legacy you want to leave? Because some of the stories and what you've achieved and what you've talked through when we've been here just in a short time is pretty incredible. Yeah. What's the future?
In a sense, to continue with the legacy of my dad, because he tried very hard to get the national park enlarged. The Skeleton Coast National Park is only 30 kilometers wide on average. It doesn't form a natural ecosystem. Yeah.
How long is it?
It's about 500 kilometers plus, And so that doesn't form an ecosystem. The animals have to move out of the park, especially the bigger animals. And so my dad wanted to have the park 100 kilometers wide, which would have been sort of a natural ecosystem, but it was politically impossible with the new government that came in. And so the only way we have with preserving the animals, and that's what we've been doing up till now, is sensitizing the people that live next to the national park to tolerate the wildlife, so that they would tolerate them existing in their areas. Yes. The government gave them a vehicle in the form of the conservancies, which is a legal entity that the government could enter into contract, and I can enter into contract to make something work, and so on. So that's where the camps came to be. And so these camps are now kind of instrumental, I think, in the future of the conservation of wildlife in the way that we see it. And in order to keep our foot in the door for the animals, to keep them alive, especially the success stories that we've had around Puros area already. So we would like to have it eventually expand all the way here to the Kunini, to get the people to appreciate that this area is valuable for tourism. Income from tourism would be good, and the wildlife needs to be tolerated, even if it's the naughty animals. And
so it's protecting the wildlife and reintroducing the wildlife at the same time as supporting the communities within the regions. Yeah,
that's right. Supporting the communities with that remains important. Like the Imbas that we visited, their only future lies really in education, because they don't really own the property that they're on, and it's a very subsistent kind of living, and so on. So one would like to have them reach the same levels we do, and education is the one vehicle that I think it will work to. And then, of course, they do get employment and so on. So from my point of view, what our company need to do is to upgrade our camps a little bit so that it will generate the funds that will make it viable, and so for the income that the people may need from the area. But I'd like to also have them act and do the right thing. So with other words, conservation is the main thing.
So that's in terms of the wildlife and the community. What about from the family side of it, in terms of the Schoemans? What's the plan? Because
I need to move a little bit back, because I overshadow my kids maybe a little bit, because I'm a bit so I need to give them direction, but they need to start showing what they're capable of and which they would be. And so I will step back a little bit, I think, but I would like them to take the reins and move forward.
That's Carl and Sindel.
Carl and so on. I mean, they all have skills that I don't want to keep back at all, and so on, so that it needs to come out.
So you think you'll get the daughters flying? They're keen, but from what we saw.
The mother is the obstacle, as I said. She had a license, and so she decided, no, she won't have any grandchildren if they keep on flying, because if you are a pilot as a professional, as a job, then likelihood of grandchildren becomes...
It's quite an absent lifestyle, isn't it?
That is the sad part of it,
But that's the future then. You think they'll come through and take it on?
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. I'm very sure about that.